In this video, we're going to learn how to use the HotDocs Component Manager. You may have already learned from a previous video that when HotDocs creates a template, it creates a component file with that template, and that component file initially may be empty. I've edited the separation agreement template. I'm going to click on the Component Manager button at the HotDocs Component Manager window. This accesses the component file for the separation agreement. You can see the listing here for separation agreement CMP in the same directory where my template is actually located. Right now, this screen is in the middle of my window, and I don't necessarily find it effective to have it sitting where it's at. So I'm going to click on the Arrange Windows button. It's the first button at the top of the Component Manager window that you see right here. I'm mousing over it, and that's going to put my windows side by side. What we're going to talk today about is how do I create a component using this tool, and then additionally, how do I get that component onto the face of the document? I'm just going to create a couple of components because in later videos we're going to go more in depth about different components. So I'm going to start just by creating a simple date variable. Here I'm going to call it agreement date. So hopefully you've watched the naming convention video already. The naming convention that I'm going to use is our standard practice naming convention of initial caps with no characters after that. To create a new component with the Component Manager, I'm going to click on the New Component button, and I'm going to choose my type. Since I'm working with a date variable, I'm going to choose date from my first column, third position, and then I'm going to click OK. The new date variable window opens, and I'm going to go ahead and give the component a variable name. Again, I'm not going in depth on everything that you see in this particular video. I'm just talking about how do you create the component and how do you get it on the face of the document. I'll click OK. And you'll notice that when I click OK, HotDocs adds that item, that component, to the component file. Now I don't know if this has already been explained to you before, but I like to talk to my clients about the analogy of the component file and the template like a body. So your template would be like your actual physical body, your component manager would be your brain. HotDocs can't do anything with agreement date unless the brain or your component file tells you what it is, how it works, etc., so on and so forth. Well, one of the things is the template or the body doesn't even know what agreement date is until it's placed on the face of the document or used with something that's on the face of the document. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select where I want the answer for agreement date to go. And HotDocs is going to put a placeholder for that answer on the face of the document. We call that placeholder a variable field. It's not the variable itself, it's just a field for the variable, the answer. So I'm going to select the agreement date. It looks like the text on the face of the document isn't selected anymore, but it is behind the scenes. And then I'm going to click this button right here, which is Insert Variable. You'll notice, I'm going to scooch this down, that it still has this text highlighted. The person who designed this document, what we call markup or document design, has told us when the answer merges into the document, it needs to look a certain way. If they choose the date September 15th, 2024, it needs to spell the month out, put the number, put a comma, and then the actual date. So with this, if I want to apply that same formatting, I can now. One thing to note is when dates merge into a document, they merge in this way. This is how they print. So I'll go ahead and say replace, and then HotDocs looks through the rest of the document to see if that text I had selected is anywhere else, and it's not. So now I have a placeholder for agreement date. To give you an overview of how this fits together, if I click test, HotDocs is going to ask me what agreement date is. It gets this information from the component file. So what HotDocs does is it reads left to right, top to bottom in the boilerplate template in the Word file. It hits a chevron, wants to know what agreement date is. It goes to the component file and says, what is agreement date? The component file sends that information to the interview. The user fills in the agreement date, and then that answer is sent into the document. So that's the big picture of how it all fits together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up. I'm going to close and not save my answer set. And I'm going to create a couple of client variables. Instead of just doing client full name as one variable, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create client first name, client middle name, and client last name. I'll create all three of them in the component manager, and then I'll show you how I'll place them on the form. So I'll use the new component button over here. Click on text variable since I'm entering text characters as my answer. Client first name will be the variable name. For a prompt, what a prompt is, which you find a little bit more detail about this in other videos, but initially what a client would see or your user would see on the screen is what you type in as the variable name. If that's not what you want them to see, put in a prompt. You have 2,500 characters for a prompt. Now, the great thing about a variable like this, when I create client first name, client middle name, and last name are very similar. They're both text variables, and they have a lot of the same characters. So I'll select this variable, and I'll click this button. It looks like a red arrow diving into the other one. That is duplicate. It takes a copy of the client first name variable, and now I just change what I don't want. So I'm going to change first to middle. And now I have a brand new variable with very little effort. I'll do the same thing for my last name variable. I'll use duplicate. Do you need to use duplicate? Absolutely not. You can use the new component button every time if you like. With this same kind of step, I'm going to show you a little bit more here. I'm going to create a couple more variables. I'm going to show you a different way with duplicate. You can duplicate more than one component. So I'm selecting 3. I click duplicate, and now it opens all 3 of those. Now what you can change here is the variable's name. You can't change its type or anything in the prompt. So I'll replace the word client with spouse. I'll click apply. So those are my new variables based off of these old ones, and then I duplicate. Initially, HotDocs shows me my duplicated components. I'll change that drop down back to all components. And now I've created 6 components in a matter of a couple of minutes. So it really does, having Component Manager open and developing with Component Manager lends itself to efficient development. I actually develop with Component Manager strictly as much as possible from Component Manager. Now, how do I get these items on the face of the form? Well, I can come in and everywhere you see client full name, I could replace it with client first name. That's what you saw me do with the agreement date using these double chevrons. However, it's not just the first name. Well, let's just try this and see how often it's replaced. I see I have client full name or first name. What would be first name down below here? So a couple of times, 2 times in the document. But I need a middle name too. So I'll put a space in the document since that needs to be there all of the time. I could use my double chevron, select middle name. Notice I don't have anything selected. I just put my cursor where I want it. Select the variable I want to place where my cursor's at for its field. And then I click my double chevron and it places it there. Now, if you don't like all the clicking, I really understand. Instead, put your space in because you need the spacing. Put your cursor where you want the variable to go and drag and drop. You'll notice it's not in blue. It's okay. HotDocs doesn't see in color. The color's for you. And you can simply use Apply Colors on your HotDocs Appearance Navigation section of your toolbar, and it'll apply the colors to that variable. Now what about client name down below? Instead of replacing first name or adding those variables on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these with a Control C. You can use copy any way you feel comfortable in your word processor. Just know I'm using my word processor, or basically Windows. I'll scroll down in the document to where I find client first name, and I'm going to paste over it. Yes, you can copy and paste in a document. Just make sure you have your chevrons. So let me do the same process. This time I'll go a little bit faster for spouse name. And you'll notice on your right-click submenu, there's an insert here too. One thing I'm going to use now is I'm going to use insert on my keyboard. You're not going to see my mouse move except to select the spouse's name, and then it inserts. Using insert on your keyboard toggles off the inserting feature within your word processor. You may or may not want to use that because when you stop development, you'll potentially start typing over text that's already in your document. Now you can move forward onto your next video, and good luck in your development.